Icon Audio Arts.
Surviving Squid Game. I am VIP 4. Jeffrey Giuliano. This work is dedicated to my wife, Vrindavrani Devi Dasi. Without your consistent love, sacrifice, and compassion, I would have achieved nothing. Your selfless love changed the face of the world, and now illumines heaven. Hare Krishna. Chapter 1. Half Asleep. Dystopian World. This is Jeffrey Giuliano, VIP 4, in Netflix's iconic hit, Squid Game. This is the story, how I became involved with the show, and how it has changed my life. Not long ago, I called my middle daughter Avalon in Portugal from Bangkok. Told her I really needed to speak with her. She said, "I'm so sorry, I'm half asleep." I said, "Well, let me speak to the other half." And that's kind of what I want to do here today. Speak to the other half that's not yet asleep. I want to speak to everybody that's enamored, quite rightfully, with Squid Game, and everything it seems to mean to people in this time when COVID is ravaging the earth. Many of us have been taken prisoner psychologically by the tyrant Donald Trump, and the aberration which is QAnon and other radical beliefs. A time when children cannot go to school or reasonably go outside and play without fear of them contracting the disease. A time when we've become passive participants in life, inasmuch as we are tethered by our phones and computers to a digital world, while the real world outside seems to be something of an afterthought. A time when it's not really safe to make love in the way it used to be, and when everyone, it seems, is smoking high-octane marijuana, which definitely makes you dopey. A time when politicians promise but seldom deliver. A time of poverty and of obscene riches. A time of global warming to the extent that the earth is now being ravaged by the effects of this, the real plague upon mankind. This is not the result of some sort of aberration of nature like a solar storm that wipes out half the planet. This is our doing. And so we sit, lie, or lounge in our homes, looking into our computer and phone screens, waiting for some revelation, a revelation that does not come. Simply, another perverted reflection of ourselves overtakes us, and we are laid bare. That is the fertile ground upon which the seed of Squid Game took root. And I, through chance or karma or both, was given by Netflix a front row seat. The dark spectacle of Squid Game has touched us all because we could be touched by something so grim, a dystopian future where ultimately every human value was twisted around $1. Far beyond the dire warning of 1984, Squid Game is predatory, seeks you out psychologically, woos you with the warm ooze of bloody violence, and bathes you in despair. Squid Game is all that, and more as it appeals to the darker recesses of the human mind and psyche. This is my experience of the real Squid Game. Chapter 2. All Life is Suffering. Temporal Trek. The fact is, Squid Game is a powerful allegory about the world in which we now live, the societies in which we work, and the relationships which we hold dear. And we are, as the contestants in the show, betting our lives. Life in this temporary material world is fraught with impermanence, decay, and ultimately death. Squid Game is a microcosm of all of that. We are led on by the pull of the five senses, and the lust for what we do not have. That, too, is examined in the life histories portrayed in Squid Game. If this were simply another movie, it would not have touched people in the way that it has. I've made 28, and they didn't really move the needle at all internally for either myself or the audience. But Squid Game is different. In a microcosm, Squid Game examines life in the material world and its temporal nature. When Buddha became enlightened, and he spoke to his followers under the neem tree, his first noble truth is that all life is suffering. Everyone in Squid Game suffers terribly. Even myself, as VIP4, am a slave to my senses, a victim of my lust, and the ultimate beneficiary of my wholesale avarice. I took the part despite the nude scene, just because of that depth. The character of all the VIPs, but especially VIP4, is so boorish and distasteful as to reveal something about the inner nature of us all. Look at the greed of Wall Street, corporate America, or the pervasive evil that is Donald Trump and his ilk. They are the VIPs. We are the VIPs. I am the VIP. So then, there is something of the VIPs, something of the downtrodden contestants, even something of the old man, deep, deep within us all. Chapter 3. Teenage Wasteland. Child Actor. It's been a long, circuitous road, from when I was born on September 11, 1953 in Rochester, New York, to Squid Game. I was raised in the hamlet of Orchard Beach along the rolling banks of Lake Ontario. I was bullied as a child, and so spent a lot of time on my own, exploring the beaches, walking in the park, and watching movies which came over from Toronto across the lake on our small black-and-white TV with tinfoil on the aerials. My first and forever favorite movie was Alistair Sim's In A Christmas Carol by Charles Dickens. I used to eagerly await it playing on Channel 9 from Toronto every year, and it got so that I could imitate most of the characters in the film. I've done several movies now, including Mechanic Resurrection, in which I speak in an English accent. I credit A Christmas Carol for teaching me how to do that, as I sat looking at the TV in my rocking chair, practicing. Why? I have no idea. It was just something that I did, something that the other kids found really weird, but something that got me attention. There was, in the mid-'60s, something called community theater. By this time we'd moved to Tampa, Florida, and I became involved in the Tampa Community Theater under the director Francis Good. I participated in the usual children's fare, like Alice in Wonderland, Huckleberry Finn, and The Prince and the Pauper. I learned a lot about acting, about myself, and very importantly, about girls. Apparently I had some kind of natural aptitude, as the director invited me to participate in the adult productions. At 15, I was playing old men, so I can't imagine it worked very well, but it was a great learning opportunity. I didn't just act in the plays. I hung around, learned about makeup, costumes, and building sets. On one show, I even ran sound, which didn't work out very well because I got all the cues wrong. So with doorbells going off at the wrong time, police sirens not in the right place, I baffled the cast and basically ruined the production. Needless to say, I was never invited to do sound again. Everyone at Madison Junior High knew well my penchant for acting, and I paid the price by even more bullying. That being said, however, the fact is the girls did like me. so it was almost worth the terror of having to be chased home every day by the neighborhood bullies. In 1971, I started attending Hillsborough Community College in Tampa, where I was, yes, a theater major, under the tutelage of John Silvano, a great teacher and a great friend. At this time I was around 18 or 19, and was invited by the University of Tampa to play Macbeth, which is ridiculous for someone that age, in their production at the Folk Theater on Kennedy Boulevard. After the very accomplished Richard Massey fell off the stage and broke his leg. How I remembered all those lines I have no idea, but somehow I guess I pulled it off. And then went on to my first professional job at the Showboat Dinner Theater in Clearwater. The show was some old thing called The Busybody with Nancy Culp from the Beverly Hillbillies. She was the first famous person I ever saw. I continued to do dinner theater around Tampa Bay, ultimately picking up my first television commercial for the rather dubiously named Badcock Furniture Company, in which I played one of two singing delivery men. In 1976, a married student with one child, I transferred to the theater department at the State University of New York at Brockport, formerly the old Teachers College. Here I did several productions which were all well received. And here, too, a recruiter from the Burger King Corporation came to the campus one day to cast the role of the marvelous magical Burger King in the television commercials that I hope you don't remember. I'm not sure how many people they saw, but I got the part and was flown out to Hollywood to be trained in magic at Mark Wilson Productions, he being an old 1950s television magician. Chapter 4 Confessions of a Corporate Clown. A Vegan Ronald. Following a 2-year stint as the Burger King, I was contacted by Vickers and Benson Advertising Agency in Toronto, and they were looking for a new Ronald McDonald, now holding the rare and very dubious distinction of having been both Burger King and Ronald McDonald. It eventually came to the attention of the media that I was in fact a vegan from the age of 15. After a 1-year stint as the creepy clown, McDonald's let me go, for obvious reasons, but it was fine with me, as I was in fact and am an animal rights activist, and never any friend to the corporate factory farming giants who needlessly slaughtered untold billions of innocent farm animals for food that is unhealthy, filled with chemicals and additives, and quite frankly, diabolical. Now you may ask, well, why did you take the job to begin with if you were in fact a vegan? The answer is simple. I was trying to make my way as an actor, a young, unknown actor with 2 children, and I frankly needed the work. I thought I could separate my career from my personal beliefs, but at the end of the day, I could not, and I was just as happy to leave as they were to see me go. I will mention in passing, and some of you may in fact know, that I was a popular writer from 1984 to 2006, having written 32 internationally best-selling books on the Beatles, the Rolling Stones, and other 60s groups. I established an audiobook business in the 1990s, which was sold to Random House, and then given back to me to run. Along the way, from the age of 15 actually, I studied assiduously and became very much involved in devotional or bhakti yoga. This, of course, confirmed my innate views on nonviolence, veganism, and widening our circle of compassion to embrace all life. I learned both passive and active meditation. I took regular twice-yearly trips to Vrindavan, India, with the hope of diving deeper into my spiritual life. In 2006, having moved to Bangkok, I got my first role in a major motion picture. It was for the Hallmark Channel, and was yet another fairly predictable remake of Jules Verne's The Mysterious Island, starring Vinnie Jones and Patrick Stewart. My role gave me 25 minutes of on-screen time as a pirate captain and was my first serious foray into acting since university. Chapter 5. Black Mirror. Squid Game resonates. So that is then the end of my backstory. Suffice to say, 27 movies followed, culminating with Squid Game. Squid Game hit a nerve. Squid Game has an appeal which is apparently so vast and so wide that the whole world stopped for a day, then 2, then a week, then 2, to take it all in. But why now? What is this perfect storm called Squid Game which has invaded our lives? There are complicit with life what is called the fivefold miseries, namely birth, death, disease, and old age. No matter how rich you are, vis-a-vis the old man, you have to get old. You have to die. You have to play the game in a world where death is this close to us. Through COVID, through global warming, through cataclysmic events in weather, famine, and finance, we're always gazing into a black mirror. And what we see there is so terrifying. We look for respite and shelter. In this convoluted upside-down world, Squid Game provides that. Even though it is, of course, cartoonish, the masterful storytelling draws you in. It's difficult not to look at Squid Game through a philosophical lens, because it is so obviously the story of us all. And that is why literally the whole world has been affected by this phenomena. No one saw it coming, but it is a product of our time. A few weeks ago I found my casting tape, sent to the producers of Squid Game, on an old cell phone. It was largely improvisational, which is the way I like to work. Of course, we always respect the script, but as artists, seek to color it, give it tonality, gradation, and make it our own. On some productions, like Peninsula Train to Busan, this is encouraged. On Squid Game, not so much. Not a problem. The actor is there to help bring the director's vision of the show to life. But with my casting tape, which was of course successful, you're given some latitude. It's interesting that my portrayal of VIP4 in the audition tape is nothing like the way I did it on the day. I believe I had 2 very brief conversations with the director, who told me through a translator that I should act like Donald Trump, and so I did, giving a flavor of our 45th president in my portrayal. Here then is that casting tape, interesting to actors, I think, because it was successful. For fans, hopefully interesting to see what goes on behind the scenes, putting together a production like Squid Game.
Gentlemen, I'd just like to tell you that I'm so excited about these games. You think there's any chance you could give me just a little hint maybe about what's coming up? No? Well, I understand, of course. But seriously, this Korean edition of the games is really unparalleled. It's something special. Rocco, that kid there in the blue trunks, that's not the guy we bet on to win, number 69, is it? No, it is. And he just lost. I had $1 million on that kid. Well, as they say, hey, easy come, easy go. And after all, 69 is my favorite number. Well, tell you what, gentlemen, if you'd, Rocco, excuse us for just a moment, I'd like to have a word with this future Olympian over here. Thanks. You. No, you. Come here. Take the mask off. Take the mask off! Oh. My, oh my, oh my. Be still, my beating heart. Did anyone ever tell you that you're far too cute to have that face covered up by a mask? You know, I could change your life. If you let me. But you'd have to be very, very good to me. All right, look, why don't you shower up and meet me in the bar in, say, 45 minutes, and we'll talk about everything. All right, now beat it. Hey, and don't forget, you owe me $1 million. I might have to take it out in trade.
Chapter 6 Dorito Heaven Shooting in Seoul. I almost didn't take the part in Squid Game. This predicated on the fact that I was required to do 2 weeks quarantine in Seoul and 2 weeks in Bangkok when I returned. The flight to Korea was unremarkable, other than that I had to wear that goddamn mask, which was uncomfortable but obviously necessary. I don't remember much about the Seoul airport, except for Chris, who picked me up from the agency. She was a nice lady, and I was grateful to be met by someone that I knew. The drive from the airport to my apartment seemed to go on forever. It was at least, I'm sure, 2 hours. When I arrived, there were multiple gift baskets, fruit baskets, things put together for me as a vegetarian. I'm not sure they really understood what that meant, as it's not really part of their culture in Korea as far as I could see, but they made an effort, and that's what counted. I was pleased. After Chris checked me in and sorted me out, she left me to my own devices, and there I was, alone in Korea, watching the snow gently fall from the big picture window of my suite. For some reason, in my total ignorance, I thought that Korea was like Thailand. I didn't understand that it was cold, so I didn't bring a jacket. I had to order a winter jacket from Bangkok, sent out right away by Federal Express. It took a long time to get there, and believe me, I paid the price. I froze my ass off every time I went out. The truth of the matter was, there wasn't really anywhere interesting to go. I was in a kind of semi-industrial area. There were a lot of printers around there, so there were reams of paper out on the sidewalk, day and night. I walked around a few times, but there was really nothing there. Restaurants advertising fare that I could not understand. I saw some pictures of something that looked like, yes, squid, but as I'm a vegetarian, it was not of great interest. My mother once said that I was digging my grave with my teeth, meaning that I enjoyed food just a little too much, as you can see in Squid Game. So I was then, and am now, perpetually, on a diet of sorts, meaning in my mind that I fast completely between meals. That's the Jeffrey Giuliano diet. Very similar to the John Lennon diet, which is simply starve. If you're going to starve yourself and you're a vegetarian, Seoul, Korea is a great place to do it. As I'd already been there for Peninsula, I understood that the vegetarian culture is not firmly fixed in the Korean mind. The assistants assigned to me brought me things like croissants, sugary yogurt, and horrific orange something or other that was supposed to be juice, but was obviously made from a very, very sugary syrup. I really couldn't eat any of it. Eventually I had to tell them, look man, this isn't vegetarian food. Can we go out and get something? And we did, eventually, and it was very good, but you had to look around. Now with Chris, we made it much simpler. We went to Taco Bell, I believe, or some other kind of chain Mexican food that had a vegetarian alternative. I'm sorry to go on about food. But look, if you're there in a foreign country, you don't know anybody, and you're pretty much alone in your room waiting to shoot, food becomes a feature, even if you are on a so-called diet. Fortunately for me, there was a 7-Eleven downstairs, but when I got down there, everything was, yep, you guessed it, meat. Meat, cookie, candies, cake, vis-a-vis sugar and salt, something I have to avoid. I did, however, find Doritos, Cool Ranch Doritos. I don't like Doritos, but I didn't have much of a choice, so I bought them, bag after bag, time after time, running up and running down. Seoul, Korea, it seems, is Dorito heaven. Chapter 7. Moving the Needle. Unsung Fame. The rhythm of my life inside that apartment, overlooking that snowy square in Seoul, Korea, was predictable at best. I slept, I ate, I did my laundry, I learned my lines, and I surfed the internet, waiting to shoot. Finally, the night before the big day, I was visited by my agent, Chris. "Well, Jeffrey, are you ready for tomorrow?" "Oh, yes, Chris, I certainly am." "Great. I'll pick you up at 11, and don't worry, when you take your clothes off, we'll have a blanket there." "Excuse me? Take my clothes off? What are you talking about?" "Well, you know, the nude scene that you have to do. The nude scene in which you will expose yourself to the planet." "What? Haven't you read the script, Jeffrey?" "Well, I know my lines." No, the script." He goes to the cupboard, he takes out a bottle, he pours it. "No, I didn't read any of that." "Jeffrey, it's very important because you have a nude scene on Netflix." So I reached for the script. It was confirmed that it indeed was there, but I never saw it. I did my casting tape, and thereafter I looked at the lines, broke them down, got into character, had them on my computer screen so I could make notes, and I never referred back to the original document. But yet, there it was. Now what was I to do? "Well then, Chris," I said, "we have a problem because I can't do that." "What do you mean?" she said. "That's why we brought you here. There were other actors fully capable of doing this part, but the director wanted you. I know you won't let him down, as you are a professional." "Indeed I am," I replied. "I now understand exactly what's required, but, it's not something that I can comfortably do." "Well," she said, "we cannot guarantee your comfort, but it does move the story forward, and you agreed to do it by contract. So, we're counting on you." What could I say? "All right, look, I'll do it, but it says in the script something about full frontal. That I cannot do." "Jeffrey, we're shooting it tomorrow. There's no time for any negotiation. Well, we're going to have to make the time. I'm willing to show my ass. Why don't you get me a robe, and at the strategic moment, I'll slowly lower it down, dropping it to the floor to expose my derriere for just a second. They can get their shot, and we can move on with the scene. It's camera angles and lighting. We don't need to be graphic." She didn't say a word. Trained her eyes on me and said, "Yes, I understand, but that's not what the director wanted." What could I say? Still, I pushed the point. "Chris, I'll show my ass. That's enough. Now go back to them, talk to them, and let's see what we can do. After all, you're my agent." She left, obviously upset and worried. She's a young person. She wants to have a career in Korean film, and the last thing she wants to do is to go back to the director of a major production tethered to Netflix and explain that Mr. Giuliano's not prepared to show anything except his butt when the director is thinking full frontal. Within hours she was back with a long letter It said simply that they had agreed to the robe idea. They would do exactly as I asked, predicated on the proviso that I would indeed show my ass to the planet. That's what I did. If you go to Google Images and type in Jeffrey Giuliano's ass, you can see hundreds, if not thousands of pictures of my butt. The next day at 5 to 11 I was already outside waiting for Chris. It was cold. There was a little snow blowing around. I wasn't used to that, having lived in Thailand for so many years. Of course, she came, precisely at 11 o'clock, appearing on the other side of the square, waving a mittened hand for me to come to the car. And so we drove to the studio. It was about 2 hours away. In Korea, everything seems to be about 2 hours away. We didn't talk too much. There wasn't much to say. There was the feeling of anticipation of the great act which was about to begin. And there was, as always, every time I'm about to make a film, my nervousness about not remembering my lines. This predicated on a long-ago production of Entertaining Mr. Sloane by Joe Orton at Hillsborough Community College in Tampa, wherein, on opening night in front of everyone I knew, I completely blanked. I didn't even know my name. Halfway into the first act, I finished up my scenes, and when the interval came, went back to my dressing room to see my wife. There she was, Brenda, waiting for me, accepting, loving, full of compassion, her eyes rimmed with tears. She hugged me. She told me it was okay. I told her it was most certainly not, and lunged for the stage door. She knowingly and skillfully jumped in front of me. "You're not going anywhere, Geoffrey. You're going to go out there, you're going to remember your lines, and you're going to give them hell. You're going to finish the show, and it will be a great success. Do you hear me?" Apparently I did. There were no problems thereafter. However, it always stuck in my mind. What if I forget my lines? It didn't matter how well I knew them. It was always there, the hound of hell nipping at my heels. What if you forget your lines? You'll look like a fool. You'll slow down the production. Everyone will hate you. So, on the way to the shoot that day, I looked at my lines, over and over, while Chris, as nervous as I, but trying not to show it, drove and drove. Finally, we got there. It wasn't what I expected. It didn't look like a sound stage. In fact, it didn't look like anything at all. It was so big, you couldn't even see the perimeters. It was just some kind of an expanse with doors. We went inside. I got dressed, I went to makeup, and then it was into the Astrodome of all sets. It was unbelievable. When you walked in the door, the big double metal doors, it was just another world. It was the world of Squid Game. And this was just one set, in one building. I cannot tell you how big this was. I have never seen anything remotely like it. I didn't even know that such things existed. It was the VIP set. Where the other extravagant sets were, I do not know. Anyway, we went in, I sat in the hall, and I studied my lines. About an hour and a half later I was called to the actual set. Let in by Chris, it was an extravagant, psychedelic, colorful day-glow room. There were cameras everywhere. At least 2 or 3. It's not usually like that. There's just one that they move around and shoot you from different angles. But this was a big-deal production. And so they had everything. Tracks, a galaxy of lighting hanging everywhere, cords, microphones, gaffers, best boys, ladders, stairs, people holding things. And then there were, instead of the 30-something gnarly, unshaven crew of roustabouts you met on every set, there were, seemingly assuming every role, a crew of unimaginably beautiful young women, Western women, with walkie-talkies, clipboards, yeah, That was my crew for the day. I mean, there were a few guys, but it was mostly these very attractive young women. I knew immediately that this was God punishing me for everything I'd ever done wrong in thought, word, or deed in 67 years. Okay, I get it. Not only do I have to take off my clothes in front of the world so that everyone on the planet will see my ass, but right here, right now, I've got to do it in front of all of these girls. I don't know how many over 60 naked men you've seen, but it is not generally, and in my case specifically, a pretty sight. Within a few minutes, the handsome young star of the show, the policeman, played by June, appeared on the set. We shook hands. He didn't really speak English that I can recall. So through an interpreter we exchanged pleasantries, and he got into position. We all know what that is, don't we? I felt sorry for this guy. I mean, his angle of vision was me. He was, I believe, sitting on a small stool. And then, following a brief tap on the shoulder by the first A.D., it was time to rehearse. The cameras and the crew were crowded in just inches away from both of us. I know it doesn't look like that on screen, but that was the case. Off went the air conditioners, off went the fans, up came the lights, and it was action. If you can satisfy me in 5 minutes, I'll change your life. Cut! Mr. Giuliano, could you move in a little closer to June? Yeah, sure. I inched up. No, not inches. Millimeters. They put a piece of red tape on the floor at the end of my foot. Right there, Mr. Giuliano. That's your mark. Thank you, young lady. And then again through the interpreter. All right, let's take it again. Ready? Action. If you can satisfy me in 5 minutes, I'll change your life. Cut. Very good, Mr. Giuliano. Lighting problem. Let's take it again. About 2 hours went by. You don't have to worry about your lines when you're actually filming the scene. It's just before when you think you might screw it up. Because when you're there, you do it over and over and over. And there sat June, parallel to the family jewels, looking, if I'm perfectly honest, just a little nervous and uncomfortable. Eventually, of course, we got it, and it was time for the big scene. Time for me to take my robe from around my shoulders and slowly lower it to the floor. Now, we need to speak for a moment about my genitalia. It wasn't really there hanging in the wind like you might expect, like you were led to believe. No. There was a plastic cup that they had taped quite painfully to my front. Now the cup, the tape, everything was flesh-colored, and it was, as you might imagine, rather bizarre and definitely uncomfortable. However, it did bring a sigh of relief, I think, from everyone in the cast, because heretofore I had been standing there, completely naked, while they put it on. At least it was now encapsulated, hidden away from the prying eyes of the world, secure, serene, sleeping. So then, action after action, take after careful considered take. It was time for June to pretend, thank God, to make an assault on the crown jewels, which he did, admirably. I shrieked in horror. I pulled back. But there was no real harm done, because the true father of my 6 children was safely tucked away inside that Easter egg in Seoul, Korea, that had thankfully been provided courtesy of Netflix. All the time I was shooting that scene, I only had one thought. By now the lines were automatic, as well as the actions. I was on autopilot, but inside, there I sat in the driver's seat thinking, I took 3 showers this morning, but that was several hours ago. I left the soap on for about 10 minutes to make sure, but the lights here are very hot. Everybody's under pressure. We're in close quarters. I wonder how June's doing down there. And then came, quite by surprise because I wasn't keeping track, the one word that we were all waiting for. Cut! All right, June. All right, Jeffrey. That's a wrap. What I didn't tell you was how many camera angles it took for this to be accomplished. How many lens and lighting changes, tracks laid down, mic checks, battery changes, and these young women fluffing and puffing with our hair and makeup. When at last it was all over, I glanced over at Chris. She connected with me, and I mouthed, "Was it okay?" She nodded confidently. The deed was done. My biggest, most iconic scene ever in cinema was in the can. Although that particular portion of the movie was done and dusted, I wasn't out of the woods yet. There was still one more contentious scene to complete. The second scene I shot for Squid Game was the one wherein, after the attempted sexual assault of the police officer, I was knocked unconscious and lay there nude on the floor. Although, of course, the scene is brief, it took about 2 hours to shoot. 2 hours where I had to lay there in full view of hundreds of people, completely naked. There was a small mercy in that I was laying on my stomach. In between shooting, movie sets are buzzing with activity. There are people everywhere running around doing this and that, while I lay there, in that particular case, motionless. Eventually, I asked for a blanket, and, as before, several people ran to get one. After about roughly an hour of lying there like that, eventually the camera started to spin. The guard came in, found me unconscious, called into HQ. They asked if I was dead. He said I was not, and that was the end of the scene. However, it portends something about Season 2. Why shoot that scene at all? It doesn't really have anything to do with the rest of the show. It wasn't important to find if I was unconscious or indeed dead. That is, if I wasn't to appear in Season 2. Why was it important to do that scene at all? Does that mean I'll be in Season 2? I don't know. I have no idea. But it's interesting, isn't it? Interesting in the same way that video was taken of me by the police officer while watching the games with the other VIPs, when he surreptitiously dropped a cell phone out of his sleeve and began filming. What was that all about? It was never explained. Why did he do it? Was the writer-director hinting at something about Season 2? Laying the groundwork for a future plot yet to be developed. Look, if we take him at his word, then I am in fact one of the few characters that did not die and could in theory come back. As 25% of the planet has seen this show, my assumption is this is at least of passing interest to potentially millions of viewers. Still, one wonders. A couple of days later we all reassembled on the gigantic set for more filming, this time in the Great Hall, where the VIPs were watching the games. This is where I first met Carla, the charming, buxom human furniture, which would be my headrest for this scene. To be painted up like a leopard, she told me she was in makeup for about 8 hours. She is a lovely, talented, and accomplished Mexican actress in her own right, who was trying to raise the rent, I believe. Getting into position on the sofa, I was told to put my head back between her breasts. However, I felt uncomfortable in so doing and had to be prodded by the first AD. "It's all right, Mr. Giuliano. Just put your head all the way back." It was at that time that I sought final permission from Carla, who acquiesced, and so I did, albeit tentatively, resting my weary head between her ample bosoms. Then there was the matter of my human footstool. His name was Mohammed, and he was obviously a Muslim. "Salam alaikum," I said, "Salam alaikum," he replied. "Look, man," I continued, "I don't really want to put my feet on you like this. No, it's okay, I assure you. But it's not really your culture, is it? No, it's not, but in this case, it's fine." And so I did. You know, it's vaguely difficult for me to accept the fact that I was asked to do all these things, and furthermore, that I did them willingly. And now, so many months later, reliving it yet again. I would like to apologize to Carla, Mohammed, and indeed June, but the fact is we were all acting at the behest of our employers, and therefore had little choice in the matter. The older I get, it seems the more sensitive I at least try and be to other people's feelings, a quality which I have admittedly not excelled at in my previous life. Shooting the remainder of my scenes, primarily with June, was relatively uneventful. I strayed several times from the script, as I am wont to do, and was admonished politely by a disembodied voice, most likely the first AD, telling me to please stay on script. For me, rightly or wrongly, I see the script as a kind of skeletal structure in which the actor hangs his own interpretation of the character. Now, admittedly, that is a hotly debated point with directors, of course, who find it much easier, and generally more acceptable, to stick to the page word for word as far as possible. On this shoot, as it was a writer-director situation, the words were perhaps rather more precious than on other films I've made. There was one scene where I was on the sofa talking to the policeman in which I changed one or two very inconsequential words. I think they were actually conjunctions, like and or but they stopped the take. Frankly, I was amazed because of the relative insignificance of the alleged faux pas. This happened a couple of times, actually, which resulted in me becoming slightly exasperated and saying out loud, "What difference does it make?" The uncomfortable silence of 300 people looking down at their shoes filled the room, until yet another disembodied voice. "That'll be fine, Mr. Giuliano. We're moving on." A movie set is a minefield, where it's easy to get yourself into trouble with even the best of intentions. Everyone, that is, most everyone, is looking out for their own personal interests. But filmmaking, obviously, is a team sport, and so it's imperative that everything mesh together like a fine Swiss watch. Chris, my young companion and representative of my agent in Korea, was herself exasperated with me by the fact that I didn't just immediately toe the line and do everything that was suggested. She rolled her eyes a couple of times when these things happened. But look, I've been doing this for a while now, and Netflix has placed considerable trust in me to perform my role in the most conscientious and interesting way, so sometimes you just have to wander off into the weeds a bit to achieve that. I made a pact with myself long ago that I wouldn't ever do anything on a movie set I considered physically dangerous, and especially when working in Thailand, where there are live cables everywhere, and it is not unusual for one to be asked to do potentially injurious or even life-threatening stunts while on set. When I was making the live-action version of Far Cry 3, I played a character called Deer Boy, encapsulated as I was inside of an actual skin and head of a deer. I was told to run across this outdoor location so that the camera could catch me yelling and screaming for whatever reason as reflected in the script. Well, I took off, and after maybe 30 yards I twisted my ankle rather badly and fell into a ditch. There was not, however, much compassion for your narrator, and after being lifted to my feet by 2 burly crew members, they wanted to do another take, and another, and another. Now, in those days I didn't work a lot, so I was grateful for the opportunity and thus kept the intense pain I was experiencing to myself. I was looking forward to the $500 they were giving me for the role, so I troopered on. No one was particularly interested in the fact that I was limping around my dressing room and out to the van to take me home, wherein, after some considerable conversation, I was finally offered 2 aspirins, which I declined. The ankle hurt me for some months thereafter, and derailed any possibility of further work for some time. It was then, however, I promised myself that I would never do anything I felt was dangerous on a film set, regardless of the blowback, and I have not. Sometimes, ad-libbing a line can be significantly dangerous, although perhaps it doesn't fit into the same category. People tend to inquire about several things in relation to my participation in Squid Game. Firstly, they want to know what it was like to do the nude scene, followed by, "Did he really grab your balls?" Now, I've answered those 2, I'm sure. Then they want to know why I made 2 69 jokes, to which I remind them that was what was in the script, and I was thus compelled to do so. Some people ask me what June the policeman was really like, as he's now such a popular star around the world, to which I respond, well, on the days we worked together he was great, but I don't really know him outside the context of our mutual employment. And very like the old woman some years ago that did a Wendy's commercial in which she calls out, "Where's the beef?" People ask me to say, "If you can satisfy me in 5 minutes, I'll change your life," or perhaps, "69 is a beautiful number," followed inevitably by, "Well, if I can't do 69, I'll do 96. Now, all of this is perfectly fine with me, as I'm appreciative that people liked this series, and more specifically my character. In this remarkable time of instant speed of thought global unity via the Internet, I can well imagine that someone could now write an encyclopedia on Squid Game if they had a mind. But as for me, this audiobook will have to suffice. One thing's for sure. If you have a little bit of wind in your sails as a performer, it's pretty much impossible to lay low or sometimes live your life by virtue of the ever-ready, always-on, 24/7, 365 Internet God that so mightily rules our world. Altogether, I was in Seoul just under a month, including, of course, 2 weeks spent in quarantine in a faceless, anonymous hotel upon arrival. The only one I talked to the entire time was, of course, Chris, and the old man downstairs at 7-Eleven, who didn't speak any English beyond microwave, credit card, and thank you. The conversation was therefore rather pedestrian. I have not mentioned that in 2017, out of almost complete boredom, I started an audiobook company, which is now rather successful, so I literally always have something to do in aid of Icon audiobooks. I brought my Zoom H6 digital recorder so I would do various narrations and cleanups for projects we were working on with my producer Mac K back in Thailand. I went to Taco Bell a few times, washed my clothes in the sink, talked to my 13-year-old Eden online, and generally hung out. It was strongly suggested by 2 agencies that I come back in June of 2022, where they both felt I could be very favorably employed as an actor on the coat-tails of both Peninsula and Squid Game, and that still, at least in theory, is vaguely possible. The greater likelihood, however, I think, is that I will now embark upon a perpetual tour of Comic-Cons around the globe, signing autographs, glad-handing the fans, and, of course, taking selfie after selfie after selfie with whomever might desire it. The prospect of doing new, hopefully satisfying roles in film is constantly brought up to me, and of course I'm very much in favor of that idea, and predicated on the unexpected success of Squid Game, I would think it's a definite possibility. I've signed with a new agent in New York just for that purpose, so I look forward to insinuating myself on audiences, for some time to come. The flight back to Bangkok was uneventful and done with some degree of dread, I suppose, as I had to once again enter a 2-week quarantine in order to return to my home and son. But, as my mother used to say, this too shall pass, and indeed it did. Thus, on the morning of the 14th day, precisely at 6 a.m., I walked out into the unusually brisk morning of suburban Bangkok and into a waiting car to whisk me back home to everything that I love. I felt good, bolstered by the experience of Squid Game and the fact that after 15 years of pretty much thanklessly making movie after movie, I had now achieved some regularity of employment and purpose in my otherwise ad hoc filmmaking career. I remember the sun was just coming up, and after being cooped up for so many weeks, not only in various boxy rooms, but also in my head, I rolled down the window, took a deep breath, and said good morning to Thailand. 2 hours later I clicked open the gate of my home and wandered inside to find Eden still sound asleep in his bed. I was home. This film project was put to bed, and I was at least a few steps ahead in this hodgepodge of foraging around for a movie several times a year, and then actually pulling it off. It was good to be home. And it was good to be a working actor. Chapter 8. Public Perception. VIP for Advents. I hadn't necessarily planned upon doing so, but I suppose I should address some people's interpretation of the VIPs as bad actors. The director is obviously and rightly enamored of Stanley Kubrick. It's everywhere in the film. May I therefore reference Clockwork Orange in this regard? Virtually every character in that film is stylized. Nowhere was Maestro Kubrick going for a strict naturalistic acting performance. It was over the top, it was stylized, it was cartoonish, and it was right. And so be it with Squid Game. This was not Godfather 2. It was never intended to be. When I got to Korea, I was handed a thick storyboard script. The whole film had been drawn in little boxes, just like a comic book. Every little movement of the hand, of the finger, of the face, of an eyebrow was included. The actual shooting, then, was in pursuit of these meticulously pre-planned images. That doesn't give an actor any room to interpret, color, or make it his own. He has to simply follow the directions. When I called the young star closer to me as he was serving drinks, with my finger, as if to say, "Come here, come here," the director shouted out, "No, closer to your face. Bring your hand closer to your face. No, closer, closer." So it was like that. Actors are, after all, tools of the director. Perhaps if you're Tom Cruise you can throw the script out. But I like it that way. I understand my job and the perimeters of my ability to interpret other people's work. So if you look at the VIPs from the vantage of Clockwork Orange and every character within, it was absolutely fine. It was, of course, jarring to suddenly hear an American voice, following 6 episodes of my excellent Asian brothers and sisters acting. But we were meant to grate. We were supposed to be boorish, obnoxious, pigs. One woman recently wrote me, "You are such an asshole in that movie. I hate your guts. Boy, you're a really good actor." Our job, then, was to be obnoxious, and in that we succeeded, all of us, admirably. Then one could, if they so choose, comment upon the script. It was not written by a native English speaker. It's important to remember that. The jury's in. We all understand that the director is a masterful storyteller. But this had to be, by definition, a script filtered through the mind of a Korean as to how he interpreted an American might act in this situation. This concept casts aspersions on no one, really. This was a Korean film, made in Korea, for Koreans, in the Korean language, about Korea. It is, I believe, important to remember that. If you're looking for a supernatural performance, check out Peninsula. But in this I was Boss Hogg, a cartoon, a disruptor, and a annoyer. And on that level, it works for all of us VIPs and for the audience admirably. It was the director's vision. And look, he spent a good part of his life putting that show together, and being rejected, he says, for over 10 years. Do you think he would have just put anyone off the street in those roles? I was flown in. They had the ability to get anyone they wanted, as the production was partnered with Netflix, and they chose me. Us, all of us. Further, not one word of my dialogue was cut. If anyone was unhappy with that performance, believe me, the way they handle it, rather than reshoot, which is impossible, is to whittle down the character to almost nothing. They didn't do that. The powers that be were fine with that performance. I'm fine with that performance, because I understand it. We actors, all of us, in every production, anywhere, serve at the pleasure of the director. In some films, like Peninsula, we have a wide berth, a latitude to interpret as we see fit. A good 30% of my dialogue in that film came from me on the spot. But you cannot, by definition, do that with a big film like Squid Game. It would be impossible for all the moving parts to work together if people were doing their own thing here and there. Which brings us back to the encyclopedic storyboard. In summation, good actors are capable of bad acting, or what appears to be bad acting. Bad actors are not, conversely, capable of good acting. As a performer, you just have to enter into the production, doing the best that you can, guided by the hand of the director. It is, after all, and forever, his baby. You know, when I wrapped my role in the movie, I was invited to go say goodbye to the director. When he saw me in his little hut, surrounded by monitors and equipment, he rushed over and gave me a hug, a big hug, a hug full of emotion and, I think, gratitude. He was modest, unassuming, and sincere. I liked him. He's a good guy, and a talented, cinematic visionary. A fish can never be a bird. A dog can never be a cat. Everything is as it is, placed where it should be, and serves the function it was put here to perform. Chapter 9. Iconography. The Trials of a Character Actor. Although I moved rather seamlessly from production to production over the world, I never really caught the attention of the fans out there to any significant degree, with the possible exception of Peninsula and Scorpion King 3. That, however, all changed with Squid Game. Upon its release, every time I go to my social media, whether it be Facebook, TikTok, or Instagram, I am literally bombarded with all kinds of requests. The vast majority of these communications fall respectfully within the confines of what is acceptable to pass between performer and fan. Sometimes not. Perhaps because there was a sex scene in Squid Game, I get a lot of that sexual innuendo, but obviously I ignore it. I wonder about the people who send it, what their lives are like. Are they lonely? What are they looking for? In someone that they don't know and will never meet. I feel strongly that if you're lucky enough to have some public acclaim, and people take the time to write you, that you should absolutely write back. A lot of people around me have different opinions on this. I will respond. Because of the volume of notes and letters I receive, it's not always possible to send a personal reply. In that case, I'll send pictures, which they seem to appreciate. One young girl who asked for my photograph later tattooed it on her arm. It's difficult to know what to say about that, but as I'm rather anti-tattoo anyway, I certainly don't encourage it. And then there's the haters. You hear from them as well. Very rarely do I engage with them. I think people get bored, and maybe they just want to attach their names to a phenomenon like Squid Game, and so they reach out to the cast. From all this there has emerged a rather fateful fan base, which both surprises and pleases me. I wish them all well, and appreciate their interest in my work, especially as I didn't really hear from anybody for my previous 28 films. People, too, have approached me about personal appearances, which I'm considering. The reality of the situation, I think, is this. There were 14 stars in Squid Game, principal cast. I was number 14. 1 through 13, with a few exceptions, are all Korean. They don't speak English. They have other gigs, and are insulated by teams of agents and managers. I am still pretty much freelance, which gives me an opportunity that they don't readily have, the opportunity to liaise freely with those who like the film. In reference to social media, before Squid Game I used Facebook, but that was pretty much it. I do have a YouTube channel which I'm developing called the Jeffrey Giuliano channel, very imaginative, but TikTok, Twitter, and Instagram are new to me. But I've now jumped in, I guess, with both feet, so these two are now another portal to hang out with the fans. That the public attention I'm receiving is predicated solely on my performance, obviously it is not. The titanic phenomena of Squid Game is bigger than all of us, the whole being far more significant than the individual parts, and that goes for anyone in the cast. Still, it's great to hear from people, and we appreciate everyone who gets in touch. Many know that in the past I have written 28 books on the Beatles, so I know something about the phenomena of people really liking something to the extent that they act out, pass the time, and generally enjoy themselves. I get a lot of mail, too, from young actors who want advice on how to get on in the industry. It's difficult to know what to say. If you want it, really want it, go for it. But it's a difficult, almost impossible road to transverse. And of those that do, if they are supremely focused and dedicated, they will have their day. It is the public who decides who's going to be a star, a silly word, of course. As most actors, and certainly myself, only seek further venues in which to work. If what we do genuinely pleases people, then so much the better. In fact, that's really the main goal. Chapter 10. America's Best Mexican Restaurant. The Measure of the Man. I thought you might be interested to hear some of the mail I receive. I have censored nothing. This first one is from a 17-year-old girl called Dalton. I just wanted to say that your acting was great, and I'm not memeing or fucking with you or any of that. You genuinely did a good job, and what you said however long ago, it's whatever. Why people get their panties in a ruffle about that shit. You're a good guy. You did great on Squid Game, and you have my respect. It may not be much to you as you're a famous guy, and I'm just a 17-year-old kid from a small town. But you did great, and you kinda inspired me to act, if that means anything to you at all. Well, Dalton, it means a great deal to me. I'm from a small town, too, Olcott Beach, New York, in Niagara County, about 20 miles away from Buffalo. In the note, she's referring to a published encounter I had with a French paparazzi while making Mechanic Resurrection with Tommy Lee Jones. In reality, it was a non-event, but the press made a big deal out of it. My son and I were at a Pattaya, Thailand supermarket when we were accosted by a French guy with a very big camera. My son, just 11 at the time, started to cry. He was frightened, and I think quite reasonably I told the photographer to fuck off. The fact is, unbeknownst to me, he followed my car all the way from the set in Bangkok to Pattaya. Look, if he had been polite, I would have posed for pictures, but he was incredibly rude. The report of this in the British newspapers follows me to this very day, and I will say now what I said then. If anyone accosts my son, or any member of my family, there's going to be a problem. Let's get back to the mail. This one's from Oliver. Dear Sir, if indeed you really are VIP 4. Now I get a lot of this, people not believing that I'm me, which is obviously a strange feeling. Anyway, he says, may I say that it is so refreshing to be spoken to so suddenly by such a famous person. Well, not really Oliver, but anyway. I write this only to say that I hope you have a wonderful life. May your good-hearted nature, based on your previous comments to me, stay with you forever. Jake, however, isn't quite so flattering. You are delusional. You should be institutionalized for the rest of your life. Next up is George, who puts his own spin on things. I must say that your scene was very indulging, but I was looking forward to the happy ending that never came. Well, sorry, George, it's not that kind of movie. And now Israel weighs in. This guy is such a narcissist. Yeah, I agree. Next, my new friend Kashala, who wants to be an actor herself, writes, oh my God, you have the most iconic line in Squid Game. If you could satisfy me within 5 minutes, I'll change your life. Your performance was really the greatest. Global Citizen, however, doesn't quite agree. You, sir, and your companions were horrible. Please admit your mistakes and go take some acting lessons. Koreans are brilliant at what they do, and they don't need your expertise on anything. Well said, Global Citizen. Sam Cutler, the former road manager for the Rolling Stones and Grateful Dead, wrote, Hey, Jeff, now I can tell people I know someone famous. Jeffrey, you are literally the only redeemable aspect of this show. James Green. Thank you very much, James. I thought your acting was pretty good. Like, I don't see the reviewers' point about being overacted, as this flamboyant disregard of social norms is how I would imagine people with that amount of money would act. You only need to watch Jeff Bezos interrupt William Shatner's post-spaceflight speech to see that's probably how they would act. I think you did a great job. Alex Marco. Smashing job, VIP 4. Some people are clueless when it comes to real method acting. Jake Elder. Well, I'm not exactly sure it was method acting, Jake, but I did my best. I liked the fat guy who wanted a BJ. At least his priorities were in order. Gabriel Isaacs. Mr. Giuliano is the heart and soul of Squid Game. He is the only thing that separates us from eternity. Harlan Dunedin. I have all the scenes with Jeffrey on repeat in my living room 24/7 to ward away bad spirits and bring good fortune to my home. Elvin Good. Please, dude, do us all a favor and Cobain yourself. John Quarren. Bitch, stop being racist. And no one likes you, by the way. Alice Turbin. You racist piece of shit. You didn't even deserve to be in that show. You didn't deserve to touch Wahan Jun. Even my mom has more followers on Instagram than you racist ass. How does it feel to be the worst white asshole in the entire world? You deserve to be in jail. Stratos Spear. By the way, it's good to see you with clothes on this time. Wes Giuliano. No relation. Hey, did he really see your pee-pee? Mara Arena Stokes. No complaints here, Gigi. Incredible acting. The perfect amount of creepy and sleaze. A phenomenal performance. Jesse Lewis. All right, Let's take a deep dive into this. The Korean actors were absolutely fabulous and breathtaking, conveying emotions. Although I couldn't understand the language, seeing their face and intensity in their voice, I could really feel what they were experiencing. Now, the American actors were supposed to come off void of emotion or care. They were evil. They compare human life competing in death games to horse racing. Ted Turbin. Look, Jeffrey, all the criticism is because you're white, and this group is filled with cuckold beta males who hate their whiteness and poor third-world kids who envy it. They obviously don't understand that the series portrays the American elite as the strange weirdos because this movie is based on South Korea. It's like U.S. movies having bad Asian guys. They all get those weird roles. I feel the mentality of this series, and I dig the VIP roles. They were pretty nice to see as a European guy. It's fun to see the Asians mocking Americans from time to time. Shout out to Jeffrey. Craig Gunner. This guy is a sick caricature of himself, and the epitome of everything that's wrong in America. Miss Marley Grade. Personally, I think the exaggerated acting of the VIPs was great. It helps truly make them feel different from us, like they're so out of touch with the rest of the world because of how powerful they are. All these critics are out to lunch. Terrace Time. No complaints here. Incredible acting. The perfect amount of creepy and sleaze. A phenomenal performance. Lou Lopez. I truly believe that if you become successful as an actor, you will have people picking apart your performances and criticizing everything. This is just a mark of your success. It shows that your work has been influential enough to strike envy in the egos of the miserable. Don't take it to heart too badly. There will always be someone who wants to tear you down. That's how you know you've got their attention. Obviously, your feelings are valid, and you're allowed to be hurt by the terrible things that people say. But I hope you're also able to turn that pain into passion and put more creativity into the world. Once again, Gabriel Isaacs. Here on Facebook, we support the fuck out of VIP4. Corey Kramer. You, sir, were very cute in that show. My Hymn Song. Don't let it bug you, man. People love being critiques of jobs that they could never do. It doesn't matter what we say. I think you gave everything to portray that VIP genuinely. I saw arrogance and superior behavior when it was needed, or desperate attitudes when it was necessary, and so on. The fear on your face when that policeman turned back the situation with your own words was very real. In my opinion, it is not true that it was bad. It was great. Congratulations. Alex Kaiser. When did this guy get bad acting complaints? I thought he played that role just fine. Honestly, I don't think he could have done it any better. He was playing a creepy rich old man with a flamboyant persona. What's the problem? Amanda Byne. I didn't like his tone. Mrs. Mary Vector. And finally, Who Own writes, what can you say about a country that recently voted Taco Bell as the best Mexican restaurant? Ending. The Horsefly. So here we all are, together, at the end of my memories of my life and times in relation to Squid Game. Even though now it is some time ago, part of me is still processing what happened. I was, before Squid Game, a marginally in-demand character actor, going from film to film in supporting roles. I was an over-60 single father with a 13-year-old boy that lights up the world wherever he goes. I was a formerly internationally known best-selling author who hadn't written anything of note since 2006. I was an errant, occasional yogi who had dropped the ball many times in my search. But then, Squid Game. And all of that changed forever. Whoever I am now has been added to, reformed, refined, and decorated by my participation in this phenomenal adventure. As I am now well over 60 and should at some level be thinking about packing it in and making my peace with life and time, I don't feel any of that. I feel not more than, say, 35. I cannot envision the possibility of either old age or death. There is something, must be something, that is immutable, unchangeable, and enduring. 25 years ago, I was on my way to India, embarking from JFK Airport to Delhi, and then on to Vrindavan, my home in India. We boarded from outside, walking up the metal gangway, and there at the top of the stairs, I saw, buzzing around my head, a very large horsefly, which, after flying around in circles for a few seconds, shot off inside the plane. Several hours into the trip, I felt something on my neck. My God, there it was, on its way to India. It was a long, arduous flight, and I didn't think anything more about it until the plane landed in India. There it was again. The doors opened, and it darted outside. And that was it. The strangest thing I've seen in all 6+ decades that I've been on this planet. What are the chances? Incalculable. Men going to the moon, splitting the atom, the Beatles, everything. But a horsefly, flying from North America to India, staggers the imagination. Since that time, when people have asked, what is the most miraculous thing you've ever seen, I tell them the horsefly story. But it's more than that. It's instructive in the sense that it confirms the fact that in life, anything can happen. Anything. Like an old, broken-down character actor and a 13-year-old half-Thai motherless boy getting a new chance in life, and all because of one talented writer-director from Korea and his exuberant dreams. Thank you, my friend. Thank you, Netflix. And thanks to all of you. My young son and I, it seems, have a bit farther to go. And now, because of all this, the road has been made easier. And all of this, thanks to Squid Game. Alternate ending. Oranges. When I first came to Bangkok with my family after 9/11 in 2001, we got an apartment in a condominium high in the sky near Nana and Sukhumvit called Liberty Park. I came, ostensibly, to write the second of my George Harrison books, with the help of my young daughter, Avalon. The apartment, located on the 17th floor, was big, open, and friendly, with a large balcony which overlooked the private residence of the Ambassador of Japan. There was, way down there, in the compound, a swimming pool which no one ever seemed to use. One day the kids and I took a walk to a market near Soi Nana, where I purchased vegetables, other things for the house, and a great big bag of oranges. We came home, set our bags in the kitchen, and then ambled out to the balcony to hang out, have a look, relax. "Avalon," I said to my middle daughter, "bring me those oranges." She sat down with her younger sister, and we ate a couple, carefully peeling them and then putting the refuse away into a bag. I picked one up, looked at the pool, and thought, I wonder if I could make it. What do you think, guys? It's quite a long way, but... Here, let me try. Harkening back to my Little League days, I mustered all the power that I could, cocked my arm back, and flung it in the general direction of the pool, and lo and behold, it landed. Plop! Splash! Right in the middle. "Let me have a try," says Avalon. "All right, go ahead. Give it a shot. I don't think you can do it. It's a long way, but..." Whack! And again, right into the middle of the pool. "All right, India, you have a go." And so, the little one, not quite in the middle, but it made the pool. Now we had 3 oranges bobbing around in that pool. "Boy, that was fun," said India. "It sure was. Give me another orange, Avalon." And whack! Off it went, again, right in the middle of the pool, like hitting a bullseye. Anyway, as you might guess, after about an hour, the bag was empty, and the pool was filled with bobbing oranges. This was, after all, the residence of the Japanese ambassador, therefore Japanese government property. I could see the police stationed at the front gate. With that in mind, I quickly came to understand that this might in fact have law enforcement repercussions. "All right, girls, look, we better go inside." So I shut the door and then the curtain, and we watched a movie, forgetting all about it. The next morning, about 7 o'clock, I opened it up, went out onto the balcony, and there was the groundskeeper, an elderly man, with a net on a long pole, scooping up the oranges carefully and putting them in a basket at his feet. But where? Where did they come from? He looked around, scratched his head, and then back to work, until all of the oranges were gone. Later that morning, as I was having breakfast with the girls, I said, "Hey, go out on the balcony, take a look at the pool." "Where did all the oranges go?" "The groundskeeper cleaned them up." The poor guy was looking everywhere. He had no idea where they came from, nor could he. So, of course, after we showered and dressed, we went back to Nana and got even more oranges. Every day it was the same. Oranges into the pool. The next morning the groundskeeper scoops them out, puts them in a basket, looks around, and scratches his head. Now on the 5th or possibly 6th day, this time, in the morning, the groundskeeper brought his wife. Now there were 2 nets and 2 baskets, and they were taking them out together. But this time they didn't look around. They didn't seem to care where they were coming from. They were earnest in their work, hopefully putting an end to this invisible bombardment of fruit from heaven into the pool of the ambassador. Later that afternoon I decided to take a break from my Harrison book and take a walk around the neighborhood. Ambling through the narrow lanes behind Soy Nana, eventually, to my surprise, I came upon the front gate of the Japanese embassy. And there, just to the right, was the groundskeeper and his wife. To my utter and complete shock, they had opened a fairly nice stand, complete with an awning and a rather fetching sign selling fresh orange juice to the office workers on their way to the nearby SkyTrain. I walked up, laid down the 20 baht the sign said was required for a fairly good-sized bottle of cold juice. They thanked me with a warm swadikrup, and I walked away. Now there's an extraordinary lesson here which I've carried with me all these years. First of all, there's my point from the first ending of this saga, which is that anything can and will happen. As my mother used to say, life turns on a dime. Second, the groundskeeper turned the burden of the unexpected work of cleaning out the pool every morning into a boon. It is, as I often say, about success in all things wherein opportunity meets preparedness. Look, I gave little thought to the groundsman, his wife, or indeed the Japanese ambassador in this little adventure. Who knows? The old man may have caught hell from his superiors for something which was totally beyond his control. But at the end of the day, he owned it, and moved forward with what presumably, at least for a time, was a nice little earner for him and his wife. Indeed, private enterprise at its finest. In terms of being an actor all these years, I tell people it's rather like being a fireman. Every day you go to the station, check the hoses, make sure everything is in good working order, and wait. Wait for a fire that certainly doesn't come every day, every week, or even every month. But you have to be ready. Just like I was ready when the director of Squid Game came to my agent inquiring if I might like to cast for the role. I spent a lot of time in that firehouse watching shitty TV, washing the dog, and looking at the clock. Eventually, my opportunity met my preparedness, and here I am today, a man whose ass has been seen by approximately 25% of the planet. A man, or at least a character, who's now almost a household name in popular culture. For how long we don't know, as fame is fickle, but hey, I'm a lot better off now than I was before Squid Game. And I'll take that. That's a good deal. I can hang my hat on that. At least it got me out of that goddamn fire station for a while, doing what I do. And so now I anxiously once again wait, though now in a much better position certainly, for my next big 5-alarm fire, laying back with a carafe of fresh juice. I'm Jeffrey Giuliano. Now and forever, it seems, VIP 4.
Jeffrey Giuliano is the author of some 30 internationally best-selling books on the Beatles, John Lennon, and other iconic musicians of the 1960s. In 2006, his book, Paint It Black, The Murder of Brian Jones, was made into a film by Stephen Woolley and Nick Powell entitled Stoned, The Wild and Wicked World of Brian Jones. It remains a cult classic and the only film bio of the Rolling Stones. Giuliano is also a veteran journalist, having written for dozens of high-profile newspapers and magazines, including The Sunday People, The Daily Mail, The News of the World, The Mail on Sunday, Playgirl, and Rolling Stone. A noted film actor, Giuliano starred in such movies as Vikingdom, Scorpion King 3, Jules Verne's The Mysterious Island, The Fifth Execution, Far Cry 3, Fire Desire, among many. In addition, he hosted the long-running North American syndicated radio series, Jeffrey Giuliano's Roots of Rock, for 5 years, as well as pioneering the audiobook industry in the 1990s by authoring, narrating, and producing over 250 original, non-book-based, interview-driven productions. Giuliano's publishers included Random House, HarperCollins, Delta Entertainment, Durkin Hayes, Playaway Audio, Speechworks, and B&B Audio, among dozens more internationally. In 1998, Random House acquired his firm Tribute Audio, for which Giuliano acted as CEO and publisher for 5 years. His best-selling audiobook, That Fateful Night, True Stories of Titanic Survivors in Their Own Words, was nominated for a Grammy. In 2014, Jeffrey Giuliano founded Icon Editions and G2 Media Arts to market his updated works as well as publish new projects. As a visual artist, Jeffrey has been showing in galleries across America since 1977, garnering impressive reviews. His first professional assignment was designing several T-shirts for The Who's Pete Townsend in 1976. Jeffrey also designed and illustrated many of his original rock biographies for the biggest publishers in the world from 1984 to 2006, as well as designing for his pioneering record label, Samba Records, in the mid-1990s. From 2006 to 2011, Jeffrey was also the primary designer for the French fashion house Cotai. When Giuliano first conceived of creating his own literary imprint, Icon Editions, he became responsible for illustrating and designing 35 book covers, several hundred CDs, DVDs, as well as dozens of promotional posters, and eventually an entire collection of exclusive fashion and art. The expansive Design by Giuliano brand grew out of Geoffrey's impressive commitment to the arts and is the culmination of a lifetime's work by an extraordinarily talented and determined Renaissance man.
Your host and narrator, Geoffrey Giuliano. We hope you've enjoyed this Icon audio presentation. Icon Audio Arts. Thank you for listening.